Structural and planning grids at 4, various structural grids due to different buildings merged together, irregular or non-existent planning grid. There's then consideration of lift performance, operational efficiency, the loading bay on the ground floor and distribution to different goods, lifts locations within the ground floor. I mean, I'm not going to go through every single criterion, but you get a sense of what's going on. But the question I wanted to check with you is, if you then look at paragraph 10.36 on page 211.
Yep.
Knight Frank say, while centralized WCs would improve the ratio of usable area and subdivisibility, the deep space, irregular planning and structural grids, random core elements, divided floor plates and lack of natural light would remain challenging for efficient and connected space. And then we see at 10.37, an ability to effect an improvement to the end of journey amenities in the basement and a new office reception have increased the score for this scenario. However, the inescapable poor ceiling heights, deep floor plates with too many structural impediments, and the existing facade limitations with lack of views and natural daylight remain issues with the buildings, which in my opinion mean there is no realistic, reasonable, deliverable refurbishment scenario. Having looked at those paragraphs, what in your judgment can you say about the exercise that Knight Frank have undertaken in terms of considering a comprehensive refurbishment scheme?
Well, on those 2 paragraphs, I would say that they haven't considered the kind of scope that I was suggesting in my presentation. So they haven't assumed, for example, the removal of perimeter calls and the creation of a centralized call. What they've assumed that those things haven't changed. So obviously they're going to have a substandard outcome.
Thank you. And then next is Leslie Jones, is it Brian Stacey or Brian Tracy? Stacey. Tracy. CD, this is also CD 10.4 earlier on in the document, so I'm afraid it's going to be a bit more scrolling back to page 150 is where the document begins. That's the front page. And the part that we were looking at with my learned friend is at page 159 in section 7.
Internal page 10.
Internal page 10.
Section 7 refurbishment.
Section 7 refurbishment, paragraph 7.1.
Yep.
And there, the author says, prior to deciding on a redevelopment, the design team appraised the existing building to determine if it was suitable for refurbishment or more extensive repurposing. It then says, as set out in e.g. the design and access statement and elsewhere. You don't know as a matter of fact where elsewhere that's referring to, but insofar as there's a reference there to the design and access statement, is the author of this document saying that there was any more extensive refurbishment alternatives considered than what is set out in the design and access statement?
Well, sorry, could you just repeat that? So,
is the author here is saying that there were refurbishment alternatives looked at? Is he saying that there were alternatives that were looked at beyond what is set out in the design and access statement?
not that I'm aware of, no.
Thank you very much. And then next question is about, there was some questioning from my learned friend about GLA's position and this point about not digging deep enough, I think was the phrase used, and how GLA asked questions about the strategic approach. Do you recall towards the end of the cross-examination we looked at CD 4.12? So we'll just get that up just so that we're reminded. CD 4.12, sir, which is the GLA addendum. Paragraph 31. We just looked at that with my learned friend on page 8. Regarding circular economy, additional information relating to the strategic approach and then other matters.
CD
4.12. Sorry, Mr. Surdis. Quickly.
Yep. That?
Yep. So that's where the GLA say that they request additional information related to the strategic approach. And just to cross-check that, can we start by looking at what Ms. Allwood has said in her proof of evidence, which is CD 10.7. Page 7. Let me know when you're there.
Yep.
Paragraph 33. This is where Ms. Allwood is setting out the clarifications requested by the GLA at stage 1, including the following: provide supporting narrative for the strategic approach, provide additional description of the existing buildings and rationale for redevelopment. Yep.
Yeah.
And then it says at paragraph 34, in response, the project team provided an updated circular economy statement. We've had a lot of questions about this, but we haven't actually looked at the circular economy statement itself. So that's CD 1.21. I want to take that up. CD 1.21, circular economy statement.
Yep.
And this is Ms. Allwood at paragraph 34 says the project team provided an updated circular economy statement, Rev 6, 9th of December 2021, which is this version. We see that at the first page of CD 1.21, Rev 6, 9th of December 2021.
Hang on, I've got CD 121, the circular economy statements, London Plan Guide.
You need to go to C on your list, then it'll be at CD 630, sir.
This is that one where it
okay,
splits
that's the one
round.
where-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should.
That's
should
very
know that.
What page?
So should I? CD 6.
So for you, Mr. Sturgis, it's CD 1.21.
I've got that.
And I'm just clarifying the version that we're working with. This is the version which is referred to as an updated version of the circular economy statement provided in response to the GLA's request for additional information.
Right.
And there's been questions about the strategic approach, that the strategic approach and the narrative for the strategic approach is what GLA requests additional information on. Let's go to that bit of the circular economy statement, which we see on page 9, internal page or electronic page 10. Section 3.1, we see strategic approach. And then we see 458 Oxford Street is adopting a circular economy approach to managing its resources. This will offer potential cost savings as well as sustainability improvements. This will redefine how the proposed scheme will manage its resources away from a linear model of take, make, use, discard. We then get bullet points: designing for the future, prioritizes the use of regenerative resources, rethinking our design process, whole life costing, life cycle analysis, prevent or minimize waste production wherever possible. And then the strategic approach, table 3, we then have a series of columns: aspect, phase, steering approach, target, supporting documents, and then relevant credits, preamp. And we have a number of aspects here. 3, in fact: circular economy approach for the existing site, and we have the demolition phase. And then there's a commitment, a steering approach of wherever possible efforts will be made to effectively manage waste from the demolition of the 3 previous buildings on the site. Yeah. You see that?
Yes.
And then the next aspect is circular economy approach for the new development, cradle to grave. The new building will follow best practice circular economy principles. And then thirdly, circular economy approach for municipal waste during operation. So there is a strategic approach on managing waste from demolition. There is a strategic approach on the new building, and there is a strategic approach on minimizing and managing operational waste. Where do we see in section 3.1 any strategic approach relating to the decision to proceed with a demolition and new build?
Well, there isn't.
Thank you. And just in case there is any uncertainty about a point my learned friend made earlier about significant changes between the draft guidance and the final version of the guidance, he said there were significant changes. Let's just quickly look. So keep that document to hand if you can. Let's just look at the draft version of the circular economy guidance, and that is found in Ms. Allwood's rebuttal appendices. So for that, we need to go to CD 10.16. 10.16. And it's Appendix 4, which is electronic page 44.
It's the draft October 2020.
Yes.
And where in that's what we're going.
Mr. Sturgis, are you there as well?
Close.
So this is the title page for the draft that was for consultation October 2020, which was extant at the time of the December 2021 circular economy statement.
Yeah, I got it.
Yep. And if we look at electronic page 60 of this document, which is internal page 17, we see at paragraph 3.2.6, as explained in more detail in section 4, applicants must describe and justify their strategic approach in the circular economy statement within table 1 using the template provided in appendix A. See that?
Yes.
If we then go to page 90, in electronic page 90 of this document, we see appendix A.
So we are
Still on page 90 of it, so electronic page 90, which is internal page 47 of the consultation draft circular economy guidance.
Appendix A, table 1.
Appendix A, table 1, strategic approach. There we have those columns: aspect, phase, steering approach, explanation, target, so on, and then circular economy approach for the new development. So it was a requirement at the time. I think I can probably lead on this. It was a requirement in the draft consultation guidance to do what the circular economy statement has done.
Given that it's in the draft, it can't hardly be a requirement. The
And
words
then,
in the draft were.
and then if we look back, we just compare and contrast the table 1 in appendix A and the explanation column, and we look back at CD 1.21 on page 9 to the table that's provided by the applicant, where do we see the explanation column? Page 9 of CD 1.21.
Yep. We don't.
Okay, so we don't have any consideration in the strategic approach for the decision to proceed with a new build and demolition. That was the answer that you gave earlier, and we don't see any explanation for any of the strategic approaches taken in table 3. So the last thing I want to then ask you about is to do with the decision tree. You were asked some questions about the decision tree and consideration of the requirements of the site. And can I ask you to take up your proof at paragraph 5.16.1.
Yes.
You were asking questions about this paragraph. And you agreed with my learned friend that the requirements for the site are transformation, optimization, achieving the spatial strategy. I just wanted to ask you, what is your view with those requirements for the site in mind? What is your answer to the question, is the existing building or parts of the building suited to the requirements for the site, which the answer that you've given at 5.16.1?
Yes.
Thank you very much. And there was a related point, this is the final question, there was a related point about where in your proof you consider the requirements of the site. Can I just ask you to take up your rebuttal proof, please?
Yes.
(3.1). 3.1.1, you refer to Mr. Pilbro's paragraph 4.1.8, which states each option was assessed against 3 central criteria: its ability to deliver the quality and configuration of retail environment at this site at the heart of the international centre, its ability to deliver an appropriate calibre of employment space to meet the higher standards of sustainability and well-being in this important CAS location, and then its ability to deliver transformational change to the current public realm, which was judged seriously substandard at this important part of the failing high street. And then we get 3.1.2, your consideration of how these terms of requirements and needs and criteria need to be considered. And then you say at 3.1.3, what needs to be recognised is that the requirements, needs, criteria as listed in the paragraphs above should specifically include the climate change related objectives of achieving net zero resource efficiency in a circular economy. Yet there is no mention of these issues in the content quote at 3.1.1 above. So with those paragraphs in mind, to what extent have you considered the requirements of the site that you agree with my learned friend in your evidence?
Well, as I said, I had considered them within what I put forward.
Thank you very much. No further questions. So do you have any questions?
I have just a few. First of all, small point, but you made quite a bit in your presentation about Marks and Spencer's Plan A.
Yes.
And the if I accept your arguments, you're sort of saying that Marks and Spencer is being hypocritical.
In effect, yes.
So what? I mean, how does that affect the planning merits of what I have to consider?
Well, I suspect directly the answer is not, but I think it's more of a wider issue for Marks and Spencer. But it's also, I think, the reason for me drawing attention was because it is also contextual to the whole, the whole net zero issue.
So it was mainly a comment towards, yeah.
Effectively, yes.
Okay. Now you refer to the Climate Change Act 2008. That's not a planning act, is it?
No.
So, I mean, are you suggesting that the Secretary of State's decision must comply with that? Or are you simply saying that it's a material consideration?
Either or both. I mean, I think I would certainly say it's a material consideration, but I would assume that because it is enacted legislation, then it should comply with that.
Thank you. Now the Knight Frank report and others that you were taken to refer to the West End farms quite quickly, actually, to West End occupiers and so on. Is that how you looked?
Well, yes, but not in great detail. But it seemed to me that what was being suggested in one part of the West End was not quite the same as what was happening in another part of the West End. In other words, New Cambridge Street versus Oxford Street.
Right. I'll just make a note of that.